Hi all, looks like we're back broadcasting live. Sorry for that brief delay. You can see I now have our pitchers all on stage with me. We have time for about 20 minutes of Q&A. So please use Slido. I'll go ahead and call up a few specific questions for about specific pitches and let folks respond. And then maybe as we see some that are relevant to all of them, we'll pose them to the whole group as well. So Kelly, the first question that's rising to the top is for you, and it's sort of about what might be possible after Efficiency Vermont conducts this. And so the question is, might one outcome of this research be that Efficiency Vermont could push services to Vermonters who qualify based on income and energy usage rather than relying on them to find and apply?
I think so, for sure. I mean, we want to dig in and understand what are the barriers that are in place that might be preventing people from participating now, and we want to employ and deploy novel strategies to address that. We already do collaborate with Green Mountain Power and others to provide targeted services to folks who get the special low income rate and actually connect with them directly. This would be an opportunity to expand that and maybe look at it in a different way and think about how we can engage directly in communities to make services as accessible as possible.
Thanks, Kelly. The next question I think is for Kiah, but maybe there's a piece for Kelly in here as well, which is folks are curious about the sort of intersection of energy equity or energy inequity and BIPOC in Vermont specifically, and how we might incorporate that lens into the EVT data. So I guess, Kiah, to you first, what, if anything, do we know about energy equity, energy inequity for the BIPOC community in Vermont now? And maybe what might we want to know, or what further research might be needed?
Well, there's absolutely a need for more data and more research. We also haven't even looked at impacts of any of the proposals that are coming forth to see how they will directly support those most impacted communities. It's generally like, we lift all boats, but then people are still at the bottom hole and nothing happens. So part of the challenge is that we have not asked with specificity around that. And there's always the question of, are we going to get a large enough sample size for our ends to have the right values? We still need to ask those questions. So part of what we are also doing within our Renew work is that we are trying to partner up with some different research groups to help us get that drilled down data. We cannot say that we have had an impact if we do not know where our baseline is. So this is some of that work that needs to happen much more comprehensively in order to be able to see where the gaps are and where the holes are in this.
Thank you. Alison, the next question is for you. Will the housing development plan include engagement of the appraiser community? Energy efficiency valuation is a barrier to financing high performance developments.
Yes. We already have a core team that would tackle the charrette process, but we would expect to expand that team depending on the demands of the specific site. And part of our ask to today is for the technical assistance so that we could make sure that we have the right people at the table. One of our challenges is that we want to make sure that once we come up with conceptuals, a plan for funding, target cost per unit, we have something that's best positioned for implementation.
Thanks, Alison. Dan, this next question is for you. Would the data project look at the entire Vermont budget or just those investments directly related to climate?
It would be, the intent is to look at all federal, state money, including ratepayer money, across the board, all programs that are in some way, shape, or form related to climate, and then the offshoot there being the trying to get the development of more clean energy programs going. So we're really trying to look at the whole enchilada.
Thanks, Dan. Kelly, one more question for you, and then I'm going to pose a question to everyone. How can either communities at the community level or other organizations share data with Efficiency Vermont if they're interested in being part of your research?
I'd love for people to just reach out to me directly. We have a draft methodology that we're putting together, but the more data and information we can pull in, the better our baseline is going to be, and the stronger metrics we can set to really guide our investments and our actions. So reach out to me. We can talk through what you've got and how you're interested in participating, and figure out how to move that forward.
So with that, the question I put to each of you, which Kelly spoke to a little bit, so maybe we'll start with the other folks, is what, if any, additional ask do you have for the attendees listening today when you think about the help you need, the resources you need to move these ideas forward, whether you're selected as an EAN pitch or not? What more do you want folks listening to know, and how can they be helpful to you in making this project move forward? Why don't we start with Kiah?
Thank you. So yeah, for sure. I can say one of the things that we are definitely needing is to be able to connect with folks that are both visible and invisible, the folks that we do know and we don't know, that are from our most impacted communities, to be able to build this bench of an advisory group. One of the other things that I know we're going to need, as we're hearing, there's a lot of overlap between some of the goals we have within this this initiative as a whole, is to find ways so that we aren't duplicating efforts and that we're working collaboratively. So ultimately, this is a pretty comprehensive platform that we're working on, and this is one specific area that is not being met in Vermont. We are not seeing or hearing those voices, and they are not being reflected in the policy proposals that are coming forth in a comprehensive way. So this is our chance to get it right. So that would be my ask, is we are, of course, we're always in need of ways to compensate folks for that effort to both give you the data and the stories, which are hard to share, which are difficult to share. So thank you for that.
Thanks, Kiah. Dan, why don't you go ahead and share next, and then when you're finished, I'll ask you to mute yourself because we're getting a little feedback from your screen.
Okay. So we have a report is about to come out soon. It's about a 40-page report summarizing what we did this summer. And the challenges here are when you start to dig in under different areas. So let's talk about water management. So water management has implications in all sorts of different ways, including the agriculture side, transportation, roads, those kind of things. If you start to dig in underneath that and look at the programs that are going on, it can get somewhat complicated. And then also when you think about the money, how much money would have been spent if climate change didn't happen? And what we're trying to see is what is the adder that climate change is causing. So there's a fair bit of complexity when you start to dig under these things. And we are trying to look, as I said, across 7 major sectors. So a lot of work to be done. So we need to try to find a team of people that are interested in doing it, maybe one of the research institutes in the state or in the region, and then the funding to do it. So we're going to pull together a team that would like to talk about how we take this to the next stage.
Thanks, Dan. Alison, what ask do you have for folks watching?
Sure. I think that planners, as part of the planning community, we're well positioned to lead a charrette process. We're good at soliciting public support and getting people focused on a specific project. Where we need help is the technical assistance, as I mentioned before, in order to make sure that our planning processes are actually grounded in reality. The other ask that we have is that we're asking a lot of people's time, in some cases more so than others. And we would like some financial stipends to be able to offer to some of the people in our design team. We think that their involvement in the charrette process will heighten their profile and also lead to a shared understanding of best practices, because we want this to become an iterative process. But that stipend would certainly be a good gesture.
Thanks. I did have a few more questions come in through Slido, if folks have a few more minutes before we break from lunch. Here's another one from for Kiah, which would, how much or will the equity platform work with refugee communities, and how?
Absolutely. I appreciate that. So that is part of the design. Again, both connecting up with our refugee populations and connecting up with our Abenaki and other indigenous communities, the folks that are least seen often in this work. So we will be building that out. This will be an organization. This will be an entity of its own design in many ways. So we'll be reaching out to folks to I didn't get to show you my slide of the F-35s going over Winooski, so because of the time limits that we had here. So we're thinking about folks. We're definitely thinking about people and wanting to make sure that those voices are there and that they're driving this conversation.
The time limits pose real barriers. I appreciate that reminder. Kelly, a question for you. As you're thinking about the equity of access of Efficiency Vermont programs and some of the data we heard from Jared, a lot of our lower income and BIPOC communities are renters in this state. And so how does Efficiency Vermont currently or maybe plan to motivate landlords to invest in weatherization and other efficiency improvements?
Yeah, that's been a real challenge for efficiency programs for a long time. And I see some developments that I think are promising in that space. So, firstly, we've got a few efforts that we are planning to launch in 2021 that are geared towards making it easier for landlords to move forward and also connecting directly with them. But the piece I'm most excited about is looking at ways to empower renters, so they're not dependent on sort of the choice that their landlord might make. And I think there are some innovative opportunities in that space. One you'll hear about later in a pitch that speaks about pay-as-you-save financing, which I think is really exciting and will help to break down that barrier. And then I think really just direct outreach and engagement with both landlords and renters to understand the barriers and make it as easy as possible for them to move forward and reduce their energy burdens.
Well, thank you, Kelly, and thanks to all of you for taking the time to pull together these pitches, make these presentations, and interact. As folks know, tomorrow we'll be having some small group conversations around the pitches, so there'll be a chance to engage in more depth if there's a question you didn't get to ask, and to make a specific offer if at you hearing all those asks thought, yeah, I could do that. I have some funding to help compensate people who need to be at the table, or I have some technical expertise that might help with planning regenerative workforce housing. That would be really great. We're now going to break from lunch, so I'm going to release our presenters. We'll see you back in just a minute.